Over the last 20 years of volunteering and working in Malawi, which is where our program is, I have seen a lot of the negative side of this kind of giving. There was no plan in place to make sure that those kids were going to sleep cleanly and comfortably long term. We had solved a problem in the moment, and we had all left feeling really good about that. But we hadn't solved the problem long term. And sometimes the right thing to do is not the most comfortable thing.
Good intentions can cause harm. That's not something nonprofit leaders want to hear. It's not something that volunteer travelers want to hear, and it's certainly not something that donors want to hear. But it's true. Short-term trips, matching t-shirts, well-funded volunteers, photos with smiling children. Sometimes what looks like service is actually out of sync. In this episode, I sit down with Erin Hempin, founder of With Change in Mind, who has spent 15 years working in Malawi, building schools, leading after-school programs, and developing meal programs that have served hundreds of thousands of meals. But here's what makes this conversation different. She didn't start her organization because there were no volunteers. She started it because she saw volunteering done wrong. If you're a nonprofit leader designing service programs, if you're a volunteer traveling abroad, if you're a donor funding mission trips, here's an invitation to do it even better. Because the real question isn't, are your intentions good? It's, are you building something that will last even after you leave? Let's begin. Erin Hempin, thank you so much for joining us today on You Are What You Give. As far as I'm concerned, anyone who gives of their time to You Are What You Give is already a significant contributor. So thank you very much for joining the community.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored. Like I said, very honored to be invited. Excited to talk to you and your audience.
Likewise. And Erin, we had an opportunity to speak a little bit in advance and get a sense for what it is that you do. And I find it fascinating that you are, on the one hand, providing service to the tourism volunteer, I would say movement, perhaps industry, if we want to use a word like that. And at the same time, you're also pushing back a little bit on some of the things that some of perhaps the others in the industry aren't getting right. And so let's start with, what are people getting wrong? What are those myths, or what's broken when somebody shows up to do travel volunteering? What do they sense when they go into it, and what might be off base or a poor match when going into it?
So an easy way I can say this is the biggest myth that I think comes with volunteering, especially volunteering abroad, would be that all giving is good. I think intentions matter, obviously, but outcomes with this type of work are way more important than intentions. And I always talk about initially thinking about you as the volunteer not being centered in the work or the outcome. I think that's an important place to start.
Help unpack that for a moment, Erin, because first of all, I love what you said about maybe, I'll rephrase it, maybe not all giving is created equally. And there's this concept, and this is what we spoke about pre-conversation, pre-interview, this concept of better giving. Like there's giving, and that already carries value, I think you're speaking to, because the person is giving of their time, their efforts, their talents, whatever the case may be, their resources. But there's also making sure that it's done well. So what does that mean to give perhaps not so well, and what does it mean to give better?
I think it's a matter of, like you said, unpacking it and digging just one layer further, right? So intentions is a great place to start. And when people have a heart to give, their intention is good. And then if we just take it one more step and we think about outcomes with the intention, you will get to a more positive place. Unfortunately, over the last 20 years of volunteering and working in Malawi, which is where our program is, I have seen a lot of the negative side of this kind of giving, whether they be moments or projects.
Mm.
And seeing those things over the course of the years has really shaped the way that I work now and the way that I hope other people will start looking at this kind of work. I can give you one example, and then if you want more, we can talk about more. So, one example I thought of yesterday was early on in my work. I was working with another nonprofit, and we as a volunteer group were able to put enough money together to buy new mattresses at a children's home in Malawi for all the children. It was over 100 mattresses that we were
Wow.
putting together for these kids. And so we had collected the money, we were there in country, and we were all going to help replace these mattresses, which meant getting rid of their current mattresses and disposing of them. And in doing so, obviously, we saw a terrible situation. They were sleeping on moldy mattresses that were literally rat infested. We were watching mice jump out of the mattresses as we were removing them. And so replacing all of those mattresses was a good thing. We all felt really good about it. We felt great. Those kids were going to sleep that night on clean mattresses. But after that trip was over, I started thinking, well, knowing what I know about the climate and the way that those kids live in that community, it wasn't going to be long before those mattresses were going to look just like they did when we got there. There was no plan in place to make sure that those kids were going to sleep cleanly and comfortably long term. We had solved a problem in the moment, and we had all left feeling really good about that. But we hadn't solved the problem long term. If we had taken that intention just one step further and all got together and thought, how do we solve this problem in a big way instead of in a today way, we could have made a bigger difference.
So that's a great example, Erin, I think, of what you referred to before as on an entire project level, that the intentions will take you only so far without going full circle on the outcome. And just for what it's worth, I mean, I think that that's very commonplace, not only in nonprofit, it's commonplace in business. Whenever we do things, we don't always come full circle, right? And sometimes we
Right.
have to refine that. Do you
Right.
have an example, Erin, of on an individual basis? Maybe not the project isn't off, maybe the project is well synced, or what we call the product market fit of the project,
Mhm.
but maybe the individual is not really synced for the kind of work or volunteering that they're trying to do.
So, a great example of a volunteer maybe making a wrong choice in the moment that they thought was a good choice. Their intention was in line, their action had really negative consequences, unfortunately. Was we were all on a bus one night. The sun was setting. We were leaving a community. We had had a flat tire, and there were all these kids circling around the bus, as happens when there's a spectacle like this of foreigners in little rural communities somewhere in Africa. And obviously, those kids looked hungry and some sick and were begging for food. And we were on the bus. And one of the volunteers decided to toss some of her lunch that she hadn't eaten out the window to a little girl as we were driving away. And as we drove away, that little girl was trampled by a bunch of other people trying to snatch that food from her. We don't know what happened. We don't know how badly she was hurt. But the choice that was made in that moment to throw food out the window to somebody who was hungry wasn't the right choice. And those things come with education and conversations long before you find yourself in a country like that and put in a position like that where you have a good intention, but you don't know how to act in the moment or what the right thing to do is. And sometimes the right thing to do is not the most comfortable thing.
So that's really interesting on multiple levels. I will say that, I'm going to take any personal example that we might have where we say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. We can always, you don't have to go to Malawi to make mistakes on how you interact with people, right?
Absolutely.
I can only imagine, though, that it's amplified manyfold when you're going perhaps into a culture that you're not familiar with. or an environment that you're not familiar with, and maybe people who are first timers even more so.
Mhm.
But you did say that there's kind of a way, or maybe indicate there is a way to prepare for that. How would you prepare, or how do you prepare your volunteers before they come over?
We have a lot of conversations with our volunteers before they ever find themselves in Malawi. So there's a lot of background. I don't like to say rules, but recommendations. We try and talk to volunteers about things that they may be faced with once they're there that they might not think about, so that at least they have some place in their mind where they've thought, okay, we talked about this. This is something that I've heard about. This is how I should or shouldn't react. Also, when volunteers first end up in Malawi, before they ever go to visit our project sites, we do a little bit of language lessons to help them be able to get around in the community, even in just rudimentary ways, how to say hi, how to say thank you, things like that. And then we also have speakers come to talk about culture and religion in the communities that we work in. So at least the volunteers have some semblance of where those people in the community are coming from, why they're acting the way that they are, why they do the things that they do, and a little bit more information on site about why we're there and what we're doing there, what the goal is, what the outcome's going to be, things like that. So if you're jumping into a situation volunteering in a foreign country where you're just told, pack your bags, it's going to be great, we're going to put you to work, I think you should pause and ask some more questions so that you put yourself in the best situation when you get there.
Well, so, and I do want to get back in a moment to the schools that you're running. You're actually this fascinating. You're running, you talked about the religion. You're running different schools for different faiths, one
Yeah.
for Christians and one for Muslims. So we'll get to that in a moment and
Right.
those cultural differences. But first, let's look at this from the perspective of the volunteer themselves,
Okay.
not from you who are taking the responsibility for making their outcomes, not only their intentions as effective as possible, but from the
Mhm.
volunteer. So you said, what if they were to go to a different organization or just kind of show up and say, "Oh, I can sign up on the internet. I fill out a form. I, give them my name, some, maybe my passport number, and we're ready to fly." What questions should they be asking to the host organization that's taking them there?
I think a great question is, how can I help? How will I be asked to help once I'm there? What's the long term plan of the organization? And who is the work centered around? Did the community make the decisions about what kind of work is being done, or was it collaborative between the community and the organization? I think it's the wrong thing to do when we say, I think that community needs, and then we come in. And it's much better when there's collaboration. Outcomes are much better when you have community buy in, usually when the ideas come from the community themselves instead of from the volunteer organization, or the organization that's working alongside that volunteer organization.
I think that's a critical piece because, we, the collective, we have experienced and know that oftentimes, and this is not necessarily on the volunteer organization, sometimes this is on a government level. There's an assumption, oftentimes in the United States or in the West, that if we were to only bring the wonderful things that we've developed to the rest of the world, we will be thanked, lauded. We've got this awesome formula and it's just perfect for everybody. So
Right.
number one, we need to pause and realize, 1 second, I'm not so sure it's perfect for the people who are living those societies right now. Those societies have their own challenges, no shortage of them. But
Right.
number two, in as much as there are amazing things going on in those societies, is it necessarily going to be a good fit for the society that they're coming to? Or perhaps there's something a little bit paternalistic about coming into community and saying, I've got the solution for you.
Right. And we can also break it down to a very simple level, something a lot of people are familiar with. You go into a developing country to build a well. We're going to go bring water. We're going to build a well. What happens after we leave? Is there a plan in place for who repairs that well? Are the materials easily available for the well to be repaired? If it stops working, is there money available to pay somebody locally to fix it? I can't tell you the number of times I've been in communities. I've seen watering wells with beautiful plaques on them from the government of whoever or from, names of people or families who were well meaning, and those wells don't work. There is no water pumping from them. They're broken and they can never be fixed. So that's another example of people coming in. Their intention was good, really good. They wanted to do a good thing, but they just didn't go that one more level deeper to make sure that what they were doing was going to last and that the sustainability aspect of it was there.
So, how do we distinguish, or perhaps not distinguish, find a way to bridge the perspective of the volunteer who comes with those good intentions and, of course, the outcomes? And sometimes, I guess the reality is the outcomes are not so easy to arrive at. Sometimes you're going to have a short lived experience.
Yeah.
Is there value? I guess there's some value, but how do we get people in the right track so that they're not looking at it from I'm so happy that I had this opportunity to give, but rather I know that my giving is going to outlast my direct efforts. It's not just a one-to-one, but when I give, there's going to be an output or an outcome that's greater than what I originally invested.
I've had this conversation with volunteers many times. One of the things I do after a volunteer trip is I have people fill out a form that talks about what was something that you loved about the trip and what was something that could have been better. And one of the things that started coming up quite a bit with volunteers when they got back was, I didn't feel like I made a big enough difference. What that taught me was that expectations are important, which is what you've just asked about. So a volunteer having the right expectations going into a program like this is important. And so I was able to adjust based on what I was hearing. And that adjustment is, this is what you're participating in. This is what happens 365 days a year at our project site. You might just be here for a short time to witness what we're doing and be able to help us spread the word about what we're doing. Hopefully you can add something, whether it's knowledge or, time, treasure, talent. But by coming and seeing what we're doing and participating in it, you're helping that big wheel turn. And that's a big deal. Without volunteers, without donors, the project can't live on. So even though you might feel like you haven't done enough, you really have. And setting that expectation for a volunteer beforehand, I think, is important.
I think that's critical for sure. Have you ever had somebody feel not only did they feel like they weren't contributing enough, but it, quote unquote, wasn't worth their time or effort?
I've never had somebody say it wasn't worth their time or effort. One of the things and I know, because we've worked in these developing countries and in some tough places in the world, is that even I don't want to speak for you, but you might agree with me when I say we feel like we're not doing enough. You get in a situation, and I always kind of compare it to, I'm filling this bucket with water, but it's constantly going to have holes in it. Everywhere you look, there will be something to do and there will be something that's needed. And if you can set the expectation of focusing your time, your talent, and your treasures, and then the outcome will be more closely to what you're hoping it will be.
So there's a lot of work here towards getting that kind of an alignment and figuring out what the value of the contribution is. You spoke before about understanding how to hear the community and not only bring something to the community, right? What does that look like?
Well, I can tell you that I started the organization in 2011, and it wasn't until 2017 when we opened our first school. We opened our first school because a community came to us and asked us to do that for them. And after we opened that first school, I started to see the outcomes of our work improve in dramatic ways in comparison to, like I spoke about earlier, when we were dipping into communities and choosing projects based on what we thought those communities needed. All of a sudden, the outcomes started changing because we were doing what the communities told us they needed. So they were more willing to participate and work alongside us than they would have been if we had chosen the project. We think you need X or we think you need Y. the outcomes started improving dramatically. That was when the work really started to change for me. And we've continued to do that. The best story I have is about our after school program. We set out to build a kindergarten for this community. And along the way, a lot of the older children in the community came along and wanted to help as construction was going. They were showing up every day. They loved that they had somewhere to go after school. And I was there for the last 2 months of construction. And so I was seeing these kids showing up every day. And I kept going to bed at night and thinking, these kids have told us what they needed. They've shown us what they needed. They need a place to go. I didn't come in and say, you all need an after school program. Those kids dreamed that dream and took me down the path of what they needed. And it's one of the best things that we do in that community is provide a place at the kindergarten after school for these kids to come and get extracurriculars that they don't get at school, and give them a place that's safe and productive for them to be in the afternoons. And I just love that. I've always said they dreamed a bigger dream than I did for their community.
That is awesome. And I can only imagine the experience of the children who themselves contributed to building that home for their own personal cultivation. I mean, that's just powerful. Do you get an opportunity to speak to them about it, or is it enough to just see it in their eyes?
We did speak to them about it. We thanked them for the part that they played in helping with the school and creating the after school program. And it's also allowed us to be able to follow these kids after they leave kindergarten. Many of them are back there every day after school to be in our after school program. And it gives us the opportunity to find out how they're doing in school, what their grades are, and how them being at the kindergarten has impacted their education going forward. So it's helped us continue to link with those children that started at the kindergarten.
That's amazing. And so, Erin, what about the second school? So again, you've established two schools in Malawi. One is for Christian students, and one is for Muslim students. How far are these schools from one another, and what's different between the two schools?
Well, I let's just say one school is in a predominantly Muslim community. That's not to say that there aren't Christian children and families in that community, but it's predominantly one way, and the other is predominantly the other.
I guess I'm getting to the cultural piece because
Okay.
it we're talking about how to prepare volunteers for tourism, this which is not recreational but is voluntourism,
Right.
and we're going to help them set their expectations. Are the cultural adaptations going to be similar or dissimilar between the experiences when they're going to go to volunteer one school or the other? Do people generally volunteer at both schools? Do they volunteer at one? Do they have different preparation?
They volunteer typically at both schools, and I've never seen that anybody has needed any different education prior to volunteering at one school versus the other. They're all people. They all have the same end goal and desires. The parents want their children to be educated. The kids want to be there to learn and have their 2 daily meals. We certainly make sure that our volunteers dress appropriately. Both schools dress the same way. As women cover our knees, little things like that in order to make the community more comfortable and to make you as a volunteer a little more approachable. Those kind of little things are important. When we opened one of our schools, we cut the ribbon on the school. We invited all the important people in the community. And in the one community, we invited the head of the Christian church. And we also invited the head of the mosque to be present at the ceremony. And it's one of my favorite stories to tell is I was so freaked out about making sure that everybody had appropriate time and felt like they were included in the right way. And before we started the ceremony, we had to say a prayer. That's what the community wanted. And the head of the Christian church got up and he said his prayer. And then I was scrambling saying, no, we have to make sure that the head of the mosque also has his opportunity to say a prayer. And the gentleman who was the head of the mosque looked at me and he said, there's no need for me to pray. It's been done already. I didn't need to insert myself in that situation. Everybody was happy with the way things were. And it was such a great example to me that sometimes these communities are doing it better than we can.
That's amazing, Erin. And I think there's that humility and that simplicity, just understanding first that everyone had to be there and making sure that they show up, and then giving them the space to run the show the way that they feel comfortable. Again, we're not doing it for them, we're doing it with them. That's
alongside.
where, yes, well, that's where, giving, I think that kind of exchange is most, as you described with the children, is most meaningful and ultimately probably most impactful. We're all familiar with certain kind of volunteers that will come and they have a missions approach or a missionary approach to certain areas. That's clearly not the work that you're doing because, again, you're working with different faith communities.
Right.
And I think there's something essentially kind of at the root of your approach, which is really to, again, see the communities that you're working with and not kind of alter or influence the way that they go about their day-to-day lives or even their faith. Is that
Right.
something that some volunteers find difficult?
I don't think they find it difficult. I think they find it different than what they're used to or what the typical model of, mission work or mission trips typically is. And so they are surprised to sometimes hear that we work in different communities with people of different faiths. My goal has always been to be of service. I think that that's why we're all here on earth is to help each other. And in my heart, it doesn't matter who that is. It just matters that I'm feel called to help in a particular place or in a particular way. Um, the exchange I have always struggled with. So, what I'm saying is, we bring religion to your community in exchange for water. We are not bringing anything for any reason other than it's why I think we're here on the planet is to be of service. We all can give in all different kinds of ways, and it's our job to figure out what those ways are. So for me, it's kind of as simple as that, Avi. And if anybody pushes too much back on that with me or with my organization, then it means it probably isn't a good fit. But I have never run into that situation. We have had volunteers of all different walks of life, religions, ages, and have had very good luck.
Well, I think that's amazing, Erin, and it is a great example because probably gets back to your setting expectations.
Yes.
And maybe if you hadn't set expectations at the beginning and somebody shows up and they were expecting something else, well, maybe mid-trip they wouldn't be very pleased with the experience.
Right. But then that would be my fault for sure. That would be my fault.
Well, that's amazing that you take that responsibility.
I
And
do.
again, you've said it's not really become an issue because you're avoiding that. You are taking the initial steps to make sure that people's experiences are going to be not only meaningful but well aligned. And of course, that's not only the conversation that you have with the community that you're supporting, but also with the community of people that you're giving the opportunity to support with.
Right. So I
Um,
always say that our volunteers, we try and be inclusive instead of exclusive.
mhm.
So as long as you have the heart for this type of service work and you think it will be a good fit for you, then we would love to have you.
Well, and we just need to really address that for a moment because how did you get to this kind of service? Not everybody hops on a plane and goes to Malawi.
No, I guess they don't.
Not yet. Not yet. Maybe after this conversation, more people will be doing that. But for now, I mean, somebody had to get you on that plane the first
Right.
time, or you had to motivate yourself to do so. What brought you so far across the globe to get to do community work?
Right. Well, I was lucky to grow up in a family where I had a lot of influence from, especially the women in my family. My mother, my grandmothers were all women who participated in different kinds of service work, but also were very well traveled. And so I saw women doing that kind of work and that kind of travel as I grew up. My sister joined the Peace Corps after she graduated college. So my big sister set a beautiful example for me. She ended up living in a little country called Benin in Africa for a while. I had just a curiosity about Africa ever since I was a little girl. And I just decided that I wanted to go and see that. And initially, it was a bucket list trip, I was going to just do 12 days away from my young children at the time and family and do a little volunteer work. And that, what do we call it? A sliding door moment. That that choice kind of changed the trajectory of my life. And now I can't imagine my life without this work. There was something about that place and that country, and I just kept coming back, kept coming back. And I think that that has also helped my work because longevity and relationship building and trust and all of those things play a major role in why we as an organization are able to continue accomplishing what we do year after year. It's been
Well,
15 years now since I started the
it's
organization. So
amazing. And that is so much to say for consistency and, like you said, longevity. But what was the hook? There was something there that made you not just volunteer and walk away, but keep coming back. What can you put your finger on it?
I can't I can't put my finger on it. And you and I have spoken. I'm not a particularly religious person, but I do feel like this is what I was supposed to do with my life, and this is where I was supposed to do it. It felt like a calling once I was there, and I answered it. It's the best answer I can give you.
It's a powerful answer, Erin, because I mean, first of all, because it's real and it's genuine. And second, there's something about the way that we live our lives when you find a fit, you actually, I think mostly you don't know how to give it a name. I think
Right.
it's hard to, it almost cheapens it. I personally made a move. I grew up in the United States and decided to move to Israel after one trip to Israel when I was 14 years old.
Mhm.
And at the age of 14, I said, wow, this is actually where I want to build my life. Most 14-year-olds are not deciding to move across the world where they want to build their life. But there was a click. And if you asked me exactly how to put my finger on it, I could not do that either. But
Right.
as you said, like this is where I built my life, and I can't imagine my life any other way.
I had somebody say to me one time that you know you're in the right place when you get off of the plane and you feel your shoulders drop. And I've just always felt that way there. Um,
Amazing.
yeah.
And have you had volunteers who have had a similar experience? I mean, I assume that there's a range. Some volunteers are like, okay, that was the bucket list, done,
Right.
moving on with life. And there's others that keep coming back. No?
Of course, there are. Absolutely. Some of our longest, most sustaining donors were once one time bucket list volunteers that came on the trip, and now they really help support the organization. I would say about 80% of our volunteers become long term supporters, whether that's a $10 a month donation or more than that. But they certainly remain connected to the work. I think once you have a face to face experience with something like this, it's hard to want to walk away. I get calls all the time, how what are the kids doing in school and how are the teachers, and they want to remain connected, which is great, and it's how we're able to continue doing what we're doing.
It's phenomenal. And I really think that, Erin, your work, as we said, this work towards not only doing the work itself, but the better giving, giving tools to do the giving in a better, more effective way. I think that that's powerful. And again, you're impacting not only the people that you're technically serving, but you're clearly serving the people who are serving. And I
Thank
think that
you.
that's really quadruple, triple, bottom line. Maybe it's triple, quadruple. I'm not sure how many, but your outputs are obviously very significant and impactful in multiple directions. So I think that you're the poster child or a poster child for you are what you give, right? When you say that we were put on this world to give, to contribute, to
Absolutely.
serve.
Help each
And
other.
I love the term serve because there's the humility there that we're really not focused on the chest beating. I did that and I can tell all my friends about it. It's I'm
Right.
really here for somebody else. It's not about me.
That's right. Some stories you will never tell. I tell people that all the time. There are some stories about my work in Malawi that I will never tell. I don't need to. They've certainly shaped the way that I continue to serve and what I've done. But there's pictures that were never taken and experiences that were never shared that are meaningful.
And those aren't shared just out of curiosity because we're here to share the things that haven't been shared. No. But those things that haven't been shared, is that because it cheapens the experience? It's like you want to save that piece for yourself.
Um, I think there are some things that you witness when traveling that it would be unethical to put out into the world. I've been seated at funerals I never thought I'd be seated at and had experiences there that you can't really put words to, and why would I? I've certainly seen things that are devastating that nobody wants to hear.
Hmm.
Just keep doing the good work. But those experiences that you have, what I'm trying, I think, to speak to is that you don't have to share everything. It doesn't all have to be put out there. Don't center yourself. The good will come if you do the good. Just keep pushing it out there, and life will be good. Doesn't all necessarily need to be shared.
That's such a powerful word of encouragement because a lot of times when we do volunteer or other work for a cause, it can take its toll, and there are difficult things. And
Absolutely.
usually there's a because there's a, when there's a cause involved, it's because there are difficult things. Something's broken,
Mhm.
and when you address that, you kind of have to take that experience and we can see it obviously has affected you in a way that you've not overlooked it.
Right.
Like you're saying, it shaped the way that you give, but at the same time, it's not going to define the way that you interact. You're going to overcome that and see beyond because you understand that there's the value in serving, even when everything's not perfect. And I think there's just a powerful lesson for everybody who's involved in giving in any way, shape, or form. Erin, if people want to get in touch with you and learn more about your work, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I would love for them to do that. The best way would be through our website, withchangeinmind.org. We also are on Facebook and Instagram with the same handle at With Change in Mind. If people are interested in traveling with us to see our projects and our schools, I'd love for them to reach out to me through our website contact form or send me a DM on Instagram. I'm happy to speak with you about it. We love people wanting to learn more about what we're doing.
Thank you so much, Erin. Thank you for the awesome giving that you're doing, the serving on the multiple levels, and being so real about it, and giving us the tools to understand that we can give better. So let's start. Let's start with the good intentions, and then let's
Absolutely.
move towards those more effective outcomes.
One more level, just a few more questions. That's all you have to do to get there. I'm so grateful that you invited me to speak with you, and I hope this leads to many more conversations.
Amen to that. Thank you so much, Erin. Before we close, I want to thank Erin not just for the work that she's doing, but for the courage to say what most people don't want to say. Helping can hurt, and good intentions aren't always enough. And that brings us to this week's Giving Challenge. We're calling it Stay Longer Than the Photo. This week, if you're planning a volunteer trip, funding a mission experience, serving on a nonprofit board, or writing a check to support short-term service, ask one question. What happens after we leave? If you're volunteering, ask how is local leadership leading? If you're funding, ask how this project builds local capacity, not dependency. If you're leading, ask yourself, are your programs designed for sustainability or perhaps for optics? If you're a donor, ask for impact beyond the trip itself. Don't settle for stories, develop systems. Because real generosity doesn't just show up, it strengthens what's already there. As always, thank you for being part of this community. Donors, volunteers, nonprofit leaders, all of us trying to give better. And special thanks to Victoria Hurst, whose support makes these conversations possible. We'll see you next time.